So thank you for joining us today for the Microsoft 365 overview. We're recording this session, and before we start, I'd like to start with the statement of acknowledgement. We acknowledge this land that we meet on today is the traditional lands for Kaurna people and that we respect their spiritual relationships with their country. We also acknowledge the Kaurna people as the custodians of the Adelaide region and that their cultural and heritage beliefs are still as important to the living Kaurna people today. We also pay respects to the cultural authorities of Aboriginal people visiting or attending from other areas of South Australia and Australia present here. And with that, I'm just going to give you one handy tip before we dive into today's session. And that is, if you're unlucky enough to be working on one screen and you've got a Windows machine, when we get into the second bit of today's session, which is a bit hands-on when we're looking at some of the accessibility tools that Microsoft has, you might want to use the Windows key and either the left or the right arrow to split your screen. But the first bit of today's session is a bit of a whirlwind tour, showing you all the apps that you have access to with your Microsoft subscription through the department and some of the ways that schools are using these. I can see, Jenna, that there's a couple of people in the room. So if you could possibly just write the other person's name in the chat, just their first name and initial. That way, when I get to record whether you've attended in Plink, I know who's attended as well. So thanks for that. And one more thing, I do have my colleague here, Lynn, monitoring the chat today. So if you do have questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, or we are a very small group today, so you're welcome to come off mic and mute and speak into your mic as well. So I am now going to share my screen and we get started. Okay. So we always like to start, let me just move that over there and start again. So we always like to start by showing you how you can access the Microsoft suite of apps. And one of the ways you can is through the EdPass portal. So I'll pop that address into the chat just in case you're not aware of that. And when you go into the EdPass portal and you scroll down, you have access to all the Microsoft 365 apps in this productivity and collaboration space. So that's one way you can access them. Another way you can access them is through the www.microsoft365.com website, and you can sign in and access them from there. And then the third way, if you're using Edge as a browser, is you can see this lovely icon over on the right. And when I click on that, if I'm signed in, I can access my apps from here. But today we're going to mainly work from this page, because if I'm over here and I click on apps and then I click on all apps, I can then see all the apps that I have available for me. So I just pop that home page as well in the chat in case you didn't get that. So this first bit, as I mentioned briefly, is me moving quite quickly, just showing you some of the apps that you have available and how they're used in schools, or some examples of how they're used in schools. And the first app we're going to have a look at is one that you're probably pretty familiar with, and that is Outlook. So Outlook is where you can go in and access your @schools emails, but you can also have a look at the calendar feature in here. And from here, you can set up new meetings or organize your day. There's also over here something called a to-do, and I don't have any to-dos set up in this account, but if you're a person that likes making lists, this is a great way to track all the different things that you need to get ticked off each day from within the Outlook app. The next app we're going to have a look at is one called OneDrive. So OneDrive is a personal storage space in the cloud, and let's go in and have a look. And so this is where I store all my files that I want to be able to access anywhere from any device. So in the past, you might have been using USBs to save your work or external hard drives. Instead of using these places to transfer files from one device to another, you can save all your files in the cloud in your OneDrive, and then you can access OneDrive from whatever device you're using, whether it's a laptop, a desktop, or a mobile device, or a tablet or iPad. In OneDrive, there's a few handy features. When you open it up, it comes to the home page. Now, don't be alarmed if you see in here some files which you have no idea about. This is because any files you have access to, whether they're your files or a file that's been shared with you, or a file that lives in a team that you are part of. So down here, I've got a whole lot of teams. Any of these you can access through OneDrive as well, and that's why those pop up in here. I'll just click back into my files though, because there's a few nice features that I'll go into briefly before we move on to the next app. So one of the lovely things about OneDrive is that you've got something called version history. So if I go into this one here, first of all, I can see that I've shared it. So that means myself and John can work on the file at the same time without having to email a file back and forth. And then if I go to the three dots and go to this thing called version history, I can see all the different times that this file has saved. And this particular one, John might have gone in and accidentally deleted all my hard work. And if that's the case, I can go in and restore that file. And then I can get it back. So that's a really handy thing about saving your work in OneDrive, is that you've got these extra features like version history to help you recover work. Now, students also have access to things like OneDrive and all of the Microsoft suite of apps. So again, if you do have a student who comes to you and says, hey, Miss Anne, I've lost all my work, you can talk them through using the version history if they've saved it in OneDrive. Okay, another thing to mention about OneDrive is that when I'm sharing, John here is part of the department. So I can share with anyone that has an @schools email address, be that a staff member or a student, and anyone with an @schools email address can share files with me as well. So that means students can share their files with you for you to have a look at if you need to go in and give them feedback. But I cannot share with people outside of the department unless I have a business case, and then I can raise a ticket. So OneDrive is for files that belong to me, and I can share them with people within the department. I mentioned briefly here, these are teams that I belong to. So also from OneDrive, if I click on one of these teams, I can actually see the files that belong to this team from in OneDrive. And if I go in, I can access those files as well from directly in OneDrive and open them up. Even though they don't live in my OneDrive, they live in the team. So that's a really handy way to quickly access files that are saved in the cloud, either in OneDrive or in teams that you belong to. Okay, just having a look in the chat. It doesn't appear that anyone has any questions so far, but if you do have a question, please feel free to come off mute as well. And we might move on to the next app. So I do like to mention a few apps that you'd be very familiar with the desktop version. We won't click into them quite yet because we'll be looking at them later in the session, but just note that you can use your classic apps like Word, PowerPoint, and Excel all within your browser. So that means if you're using a computer that you're not normally, it's not your normal computer, you can still access your files through Excel and Word and PowerPoint, etc. if you've saved them in your OneDrive or Teams. Just know that these web versions of the applications look quite different and have a different feature set as well. The next app that we're going to have a look at is also one that is online, but also there's a desktop version, and that's OneNote. So OneNote here is it's a digital or an electronic notebook. So you might remember in the past, you might, or when you were a student yourself, you might have had a yellow spirally book with lots of file sections down the side, like you see in those icons here. And that's essentially what a OneNote is. It's also a desktop app, and I'm just going to hop into the desktop app to show you a couple of examples of what I'm talking about. So this here is a OneNote. You can see down here we've got pages, and you can see across the top I've got these file sections replicating that old book that I might have been using to write in by hand. And then if I click in here, I can see in each section I've got various pages. So this example here is one that you could use to record your staff meetings. Why you might use OneNote instead of individual Word documents, for example, is that when I'm clicking in here, I can just click and easily move between the different sections rather than having to go in and open a document each time I want to find a different week. Also, something that is quite nice is you can do things like hyperlinks in OneNote. So again, if I want to easily go to a page, if I click here, I've got it hyperlinked to that page in that OneNote. OneNotes can also live in teams. So if I set up my OneNote in a team, for example, all the staff that I've added to this team will be able to access this OneNote without me having to do any, invite anyone to share the notebook as well. I'm just going to show you one more example of a OneNote, and that's a teaching OneNote. So with OneNote, there's the classic one, like I just showed you with the staff meeting example, but there's also OneNotes that are specific for teaching. And this is a class notebook, and you can see here it's got some sections up the top that are quite special. And then Belinda Pearson's a student in this class that I've set up, so I can see she's got a section as well. So these sections are a bit special. This one here allows all your students to collaborate in the same document at the same time. There's a content library which allows you to share the content that you're teaching with your students and for them to access this as they need to. It also can act as a writing space on your board. So when I was teaching in the classroom, I had my OneNote up on the board and I would be writing in there on the board as I was discussing the work that we're doing with the class. So that's why you can see my handwriting there as well. It also has this teacher only section, which is only visible for teachers, and that's where you could do your planning. And then, as I mentioned briefly, it's got a section for each student. So if this was a normal class, I'd see 30 names along the top here, and the student can access those pages, and me as the teacher can as well. So that's a very brief look at OneNote. Okay, so back in the All Apps, the next app that we're going to have a quick look at is one called Sway. So Sway is an online presentation tool, a little bit like PowerPoint, but it's more suited towards viewing things on the web. So this is what the interface looks like. And lots of schools at the moment are using Sways for things like newsletters. So one really nice thing about Sways is they're what we call responsive, meaning that if I'm a parent and I'm wanting to view this on my mobile phone, all right, my computer's playing up. There we go. You'll notice that as I move the screen to represent a mobile phone size screen, my Sway is doing some magic in the background and adjusting it itself so that I can then read that easily on a smaller device. So that's one thing that you might think of or consider if you're thinking of moving from a PDF newsletter to a digital newsletter like a Sway. Sways can be shared outside of the department, which means that they're perfect for things like newsletters. And there's some really cool features in Sways, such as the ability to embed different media. In this example here, we've got a Microsoft form embedded, which can also be shared outside of the department. So I'm asking for people in my newsletter to volunteer for the Grandparents, Parents and Special Day event at my school. And those people that want to can fill this in straight away and submit it within that newsletter. Another nice feature in Sways is often, if it's a PDF newsletter, I've got about 20 pages at the back with community announcements, or I might be the person doing the newsletter and I've got 20 flyers that have come in and I can only pick a couple. Because it's electronic, there's a nice feature called a stack, which means that I can pop all those 20 articles in and parents can just flick through. And then if they wanted more information on one of those, they can enlarge it. So that's a nice feature. And you also have the ability to embed videos, either from the internet, so such as YouTube, or you can upload a video that you've taken in the school as well and use Sway to share that with parents. I've got two last examples of Sway. So this is another example of how you might use Sway with your school. And again, because Sway can be shared outside of the department, this example here is a student portfolio. So this kid has created this and he's now able to share this with, say, his work experience mentor or a future employee. He can share his learning with his family as well easily by sharing the Sway link. Okay, and the last example is a PD example. So this is the back end of Sways. This is what it looks like when you're creating them. And this one here is just an example of how you might use a Sway to present a PD for your staff. So notice how it's nicely set out, easy to put together, and you can embed that media-rich content straight into the Sway. The last thing I want to talk about with Sways is that there's also this great feature called analytics. So again, if I'm sending an email out to parents and it's got a PDF attached, I don't get lots of information back about how many people have actually opened that PDF up and read my newsletter. Sway doesn't give you very in-depth analytics, but it does tell you quite a bit of information. So for example, this Sway here, I can see that there's 137 people that have looked at it, and most of those people just glanced at it, a couple read it quickly, and then 18 people read it in depth. So that gives me some ideas around whether my newsletter is successful or my Sway is successful, and where I might need to put information that's really important to my readers. So that's really powerful data that you don't get if you're sending an email out. Any questions on Sway? All very quiet here today. Okay. So the next app we're going to look at is something called Forms. So if you've ever used SurveyMonkey or Google Forms, Microsoft Forms is Microsoft's version of Forms. Hopefully we're in the right end. So this is what Forms look like when you open it up. You'll see all the forms you have access to at the top, and then you can go in and create them. Forms as well you can share with people outside of the department. So for example, this one, oh, here we go. For example, this one here is again a registration form example that I might send out to my community via my newsletter, and I'm asking for people to put in their name, their child's name, and then say if I'm able to help. Now, when I look at the back end of this one here has got something called branching. So if I click on here around how often I can help to daily, I can now then enter in some details. Whereas if I put in occasionally, for example, I don't get those details. Another example of how you might use forms is with students and create something called a quiz. And quiz allows you to create tests that can be self-marked. It could be a formative test or it could be a summative test. You can also put a time limit on the form and also limit how many times or attempts a student can have at the quiz. So if I click on start here, you can see I've got a question with a visual and it's worth 1 point. Now in this particular one as well, if I put in the wrong answer, it's going to give me some extra support because as a teacher, this is how I built it with this thing called branching. And then if I click move on, it's going to show me the next question, etc. So that's really a powerful use of forms. It means that this is going to be self-marking when I submit it, and I don't have to spend that time as a teacher going through, especially if it's a multiple choice type quiz. You can, in quizzes, if you create quizzes, put longer answer questions as well. And those aren't self-marking, so you will have to look at them as a teacher. But if you've got a mixture of long answer questions and short answer questions, it will save you time. I showed you the analytics in Sways. Forms also have some really nice analytics, which means that they're not only useful for you as a teacher or a school admin to create, to get information, but they're also useful for students if they're doing maths data collection, for example. So I'm just going to show you the back end of this form that's had quite a few people respond to it. And if I'm the owner of the form or the form has been shared with me so I can edit it, when I click in the responses, I get like an overview of the responses. So I get some nice graphic visuals, pie charts and line graphs. And also if it's a short answer question, I get some nice word clouds in here as well. So I can quickly at a glance get some really in-depth insight into the data that I collected. I can also open this in Excel, and then that will give me a lot of flexibility to work further with that data. So that's really great in that I've got it all in one place, and there's also lots of ways you can take forms much further if you connect them to things like Power Automate, which I'll show you a little bit later. Okay, the next app I'm going to talk about briefly is Teams. Now there's a new version of Teams that has been released. It came out late last year. So if the Teams I'm about to show you looks slightly different from your version, you might see up the top there's a toggle to toggle on new Teams. Don't do that now because it will kick you off the call. But if you haven't got the new Teams with that turquoise banner up now, you might want to explore using that later. Just to note, at the moment, there seems to be an issue with adding students to class teams by the new teams. So if you are using classes and you haven't added your students yet, maybe hold off on using the new teams. But Teams is a fantastic app in that it is not only an app where you can use the chat function to talk with everyone that is a staff member in the department, but you can also create these teams for use with your class and your students, but also to use within your smaller PLC or smaller group of staff, so that you can store files that everyone is going to be accessing in one place, and that everyone can access these anywhere at any time, just like with OneDrive, as we discussed earlier. Just on the chat, you cannot chat with students. So even though if you put in a student's name, they might pop up with a chat, chat is disabled between staff and students in our tenancy for child safety protection reasons. There's also the calendar within Teams, and that's linked to your Outlook calendar. So any appointments you have in Outlook will come up in your Teams calendar as well. Okay, so after Teams, we're going to have a very brief look at Whiteboard. So that's this app down here. And Whiteboard is simply a whiteboard. So I'll just go in and create a new whiteboard. Microsoft have created a whole lot of different templates that you can use to quickly build something on your board. So I'll just go into the learning ones. So you'll see there's a range of learning type templates which you can use with your students. Let's just click this one, bring that down. So you can use these as is, or you can go in and edit them as well. And then you've got the ability to share this with your students either through Teams, in a Teams meeting, or just by sharing the link. And then you can have the whole class collaborate, or you can also share it with individual students as well. Down the bottom here, there's a whole range of different features that you can use, such as add in a sticky note. And if you do add a sticky note, it will come up with your name. It's very small here on the screen, but you can see here, there's my username here, which means that if you are collaborating with a whole group of students, you can see who has contributed what to the whiteboard. Okay, now the next app, I'm going to have to dive into my other account to show you, and that's one called Bookings. So Bookings allows you to create a space for people outside of the department to book time with you. So this is great if your school doesn't have some method at the moment for things like parent-teacher interviews. And what Bookings allows you to do is set up an event type space, add the staff in there that need access to the booking or that are going to be part of the booking and people can book to see. And then you can share this link here with parents. And this is what they see. And then they can choose what or who they need to see, and then click on the available staff. Now, if it's set up correctly, you'll just see the times that are available. So say this one here is, well, this is the only spot available for this particular teacher. So this is the only one that me as a parent can book at this time. If I move to Friday, I've got more choice because people haven't booked in. It's a really great tool because, as you can see, this one's got 20 minutes, this one's got 30 minutes, so it's got lots of flexibility to choose how long each spot is going to be. You can choose breaks in between, so you can put 5 minutes in between each interview as well, and it helps parents book in and you organise your time without having to be puzzle masters and work out who's doing who. It's best in best dress in the times that are available. Okay, now while I'm in this account as well, I'm going to show you something called Power Automate. This one we don't offer a lot of support on. However, it is something that is getting more and more exciting, and you as a teacher or as an admin staff or as a corporate staff might get lots of value out of having a bit of an explore of Power Automate. Now, what Power Automate allows you to do is it allows you to set up things called flows that automate a process. So this particular flow I have here is creating a task in Planner, which I'll show you in a moment, so that when I receive an email, if it's an important email, I'm going to flag it. And when I flag it, what this does is it automatically thinks, yep, this is an important thing. I'm going to create a task in Planner. So my simple one click of flagging that email in Outlook means that the computer will do all this work, getting the information from the email and creating a task. And if it needs to, updating task details as well. So that's a really powerful app that I think more and more people will have a look at and explore. So it will build my to-do list, this particular flow, without me having to copy and paste. Okay, going back into my other account, there's a few more that we're going to have a quick look at. So the next one is lists. And lists are a bit like Excel spreadsheets. If I go into them, you can see here it looks very similar to an Excel spreadsheet. They're a bit safer than Excel spreadsheets in that it's hard to delete data from them, but you can also share these easily within Teams as well, which makes them a little bit more collaborative than an Excel spreadsheet. You can also put coding in the back end like you can in Excel, so that all sorts of things happen in terms of tick boxes and drop downs and things like that. So that's lists. And the next one we have a very brief look at is Stream. So I might just mention that Stream has been around for a while, but there's a new version of Stream that looks very different from the old version of Stream, Stream Classic. And Stream Classic is ceasing to exist in April. And if you are one of those people that have been using Stream Classic, if you haven't downloaded your videos from Stream Classic before the end of April, they are actually going to be deleted by Microsoft. But let's go in and have a look at the new Stream. So Stream is basically a tool that organizes all your videos that you have saved either in Teams or in OneDrive. So here, all these videos live somewhere. They might be ones that I've created, or they might be ones from meetings, for example, or they might be videos that have been shared with me as well. As well as easily finding your videos through Stream, you've also got the ability to do some creation. So you can screen record, you can record your camera, you can also create playlists to share as well. And if you've got video from elsewhere, you can upload that, and then you can share these videos with individuals or with teams of people as well. So that's Stream. And you'll see here that note about Classic Stream ceasing to exist. And the last app, before we start doing some doing, is a Planner that we're going to go into. So I mentioned this briefly when I talked about my Power Automate flow. Planner is a to-do kind of list. It's the Kavana style here, but it allows me to create buckets and then add tasks to buckets. I can also assign these tasks to different people. So you can have a planner that lives in your own space, but you can also put planner boards in Microsoft Teams and then assign different tasks to different teams. You can tick things off when they're completed, and you can also go in and edit them and add notes, add more items to the different task as well, and also attach different items in there. So it's a really nice way of organising tasks, but also collaborating and working with your colleagues. So that's Planner. Okay, so the next bit of our webinar today, we're going to look at some immersive accessibility tools, such as Immersive Reader and Reading Coach, which you can use with students, or you might just like to use for yourself. For example, dictation, which we're going to have a look at as well. You can use that if you're more of a speaker rather than a typer as well. So the first tool we're going to have a look at is the Immersive Reader and Reading Coach. And to do that, we're going to actually go into Word Online. So if you've just been following and taking notes, I'd love you now to actually open up Word on a device so that we can do this bit of the webinar together. So once you have it open, if you can give me a physical thumbs up or a virtual thumbs up, or just type that I have Word up, that would be great. If you have forgotten how to access it, remember you can get to it from the EdPass portal. If it comes in looking like this, I just need to scroll down and then click on Word. And then I should open up Word Online. I'll just give people a moment to try and open up Word Online. Jenna, are you working on one device as well? You can just nod because I can't hear you. Okay, Jamie, you've got it. If you are struggling with one screen, you might just have to watch this bit as well. But if you do have another device, it would be great if you can do some hands-on things. Okay, we've got a few people that have got it. Excellent. Okay, so we're in Word Online, and we're going to have a quick look at something called Immersive Reader. Now, Immersive Reader is a program that was developed to help dyslexic students read, but it is actually such a useful program to help anybody, anywhere. If you're working with communities that are quite multicultural, you can use it to help you communicate with parents, for example, as well. So what I first need to do before I can demonstrate what it is I do need to have some text on my screen. So I'm just going to open a new tab and I'm just going to put in Wikipedia article of the day and go into there. And then I'm just going to grab the text here. So basically, you don't have to do what I've just done through Wikipedia as long as you've got some text. I'm just going to copy that, Control-C to copy, Control-V to paste, and drop that into my Word document. So hopefully everyone's got some text in there now. And hopefully I've shared my sound as well. Okay, so now that you've got some text in there, fingers crossed, what I want to do is I want to click on the View tab in my Word Online. And then I'll see this thing called Immersive Reader. Now, Immersive Reader is available in a wide range of Microsoft apps, everything from Minecraft to Teams. So wherever you see this logo, you've got access to Immersive Reader. And when I click on that, it's going to reformat my page. Now, Word remembers what you did the last time. So if you set it up a certain way, because that helps you read, you don't have to set it up each time you open it. So I'm just going to go into these menus at the top here. So the first one allows me to change the size of the text. So again, if I'm a student that's struggling with lots of text on the page, I might want to make this text size larger. I can increase or decrease the spacing. I'm going to untick the source formatting, and I can change the theme. So again, some students read better on different colours, especially if they're dyslexic. And believe it or not, also Comic Sans is the best font for students with dyslexia to read. Now, so you can have a bit of fun playing around and working out what works best for you. The second menu here is the grammar options. So yours probably didn't open up with all these parts of speech in here, but I can toggle on and off syllables, and I can toggle on and off my verbs, adverbs, etc. I can also change the colour. So if you're using a particular literacy program which has different colours for the different parts of speech, you've got a bit of flexibility in there to go and change those according to the literacy program that you're using. And if you don't want those on, you can just toggle it off as well, or just toggle off the different ones here as well. I'm just going to leave on the nouns though. So that bit is really helpful, especially if you're wanting to do something on the whiteboard. You can have this up and you can talk about the different parts of speech with students. The last one here is a really cool feature. So line focus up here, it doesn't work if you've only got one sentence. So that's why I copied a chunk of text in here. But again, this is to help students if they have trouble with lots of text on a page. They could just use line focus as one, or a bit more text, or a bit more text. There's a picture dictionary. So if I hover over a word, oh, it's not going to give me, here we've got, it's going to give me a picture clue. So again, that can help us with students that are not strong readers. You'll notice, or you would have noticed, that I've got French under here as well. So this is where Immersive Reader can help you with students whose English isn't very strong, or who come from a background where English is not their first language. You can use this translate feature. Now, I know French, so that's why I've chosen French, but there are lots of languages in here that you can choose from. Now, some of them only change, let's try Nepalese, only change the script. They don't allow you to hear it as well. But there are lots in here that allow you to hear the speech as well. And Microsoft, let's find French again. Microsoft is always updating this with new languages. Now, it's not perfect when you go and translate the whole document. It's not perfect, but it is getting better and better every day. Now, as well as all these features to help the student read themselves, there's also this play button down here, and I'll just turn it back to English. If I press the play,
written in the Egyptian language from ancient Egypt's pharaonic period,
it's going to read that text back to me as well. I've got some voice settings in here as well, so I can change the speed and I can change it from male to female as well. Now that was an English voice. If I change this back to English, hopefully it's got English Australian. And now play, it should change the accent
period
as well.
until the end of Roman domination.
Still sounds pretty English, but it should have an Australian type accent as well. So that's Immersive Reader, which is a really cool tool. And I really do highly recommend introducing that to your students. There's this reading coach thing here, which I'm not going to have enough time to delve in deep with today. But if you go in and do this, what that allows students to do is practice reading, and the computer will record what they're saying, analyze it, and then give them a score for fluency, pick some of the words it thinks they might like, they need practice at, and then they can practice those as well. So that, again, that's a really good tool for supporting students to increase their fluency and their reading. Okay, any questions on Immersive Reader? They're all good, hopefully. Yep. Okay, so I'm going to get out of Immersive Reader by clicking on the back button, and I'm back in my Word Online. And so the next tool I'm going to have a look at is something called Dictate. So I'm just going to put in a few enter lines here. And then in my menus up the top, I'm going to go back to my home. And then over here in the right, I've got this thing called Dictate. So I'm going to click on Dictate. And then I've got this menu come up. And you can see straight away it's listening and it's typing what I'm saying. Now, again, you do need to go back and edit what is typed. It isn't perfect, it's pretty good, but you do need to go back and edit, and you can see it hasn't put any full stops in. If I do want a full stop to be in there, all I have to say is full stop, and it stopped typing for me for some reason. So let's try again. All I need to do is put in a full stop. It's not liking me. You can go into the settings, and again, you can change the language spoken. So if you do come from a different country and have a different accent, you can choose a different English accent. You can also choose a different language. Let's see if it's going to work for me now. Et puis, si tu parles dans la langue, no, it's not going to, there we go. So let's change it back to English, otherwise it will get confused. So you can see it's now put in the French there, and that's pretty good. That's pretty much what I said. And it's put in the accents that go with that language as well. So it's a pretty handy tool. How would you use it as a teacher? You could use it to write your reports, knowing that you have to go back and edit it. But I would also introduce this one to your students, especially those students that struggle typing or writing, but have lots of ideas running around in their head. They can say and speak and get all those ideas out, and then go back and review and edit and craft those ideas into a written piece of text. So it's a really powerful tool. Microsoft is introducing better tools to block out that classroom noise that happens in the background. At the moment, you will probably have to get the kid to sit in a quiet area, maybe outside the classroom door, in order to use Dictate. But they do recognise that this is an issue, and it is a powerful tool for the classroom, so they are all the time building in ways to make it more accessible for teachers to use in the classroom with a busy, noisy class as well. Okay, so the last tool we're going to have a look at, and I'm only going to briefly show you how to access it. I'm not going to do a live demonstration because it doesn't like the fact that I'm doing this in Teams, is something called Rehearse Coach. So I've opened up PowerPoint, and you're welcome to open up a blank PowerPoint as well and give it a go. But what the tool I'm looking at today, or I'm going to briefly show you how to access, is something called Rehearse Coach. Now, what this does, a bit like Immersive Reader and that reading coach that I mentioned, is it allows students to practice doing a presentation, and it will give them some feedback. So how I access this is if I go to Slideshow, I can click on the Rehearse with Coach. Now, I'm not going to click on it here because it doesn't work in a Teams meeting. But if I click on there, it will take me into the slideshow view of the presentation, and it will get me to click on a record button. I can then go through the slides, talk to the slides, and then at the end, it will give me a report like this one here. So it's a bit blurry, apologies for that, but hopefully you can still make out some of the details. So it tells me how much time I spent, how many slides I went through. It gives me a score around the pace. It tells me if I'm saying or too much. You see here I've got a filler so that's something I need to work on. It tells me how my pitch is going if I'm speaking too monotone, and it also, if I've just read the information I have off the slides, which is something our students do all the time, it will give me that in the originality box here. So again, it's a really powerful tool that students can use by themselves without anybody else and still get that really important feedback that they can use then to improve themselves. You as well, if you struggle to present in front of people, you can use the Rehearse Coach as well. So that again, in PowerPoint, along the top there, if you go to the Slideshow tab, there's the Rehearse with Coach. And I think this is available in the online version as well. Let's go in and double check before, if I open up the right tab, before we finish off the session today. So let's just go in and double check that. Yes, it is. Here it is, Rehearse with Coach, so students can use that in their online version as well. And then that brings us more or less to the end of this session. And I think the fire drill interrupted me because I haven't got my normal slides up that I show at the end of the lesson that we will manage. So I always like to end the session by giving you some information about where you can go for next steps. So one of the great places you can look at, hopefully this is the right link, is Microsoft Learn. And this is free. Anyone can sign in and create an account. We do suggest you use your @schools email address to sign in and create an account. And then there's all sorts of learning paths that you can access that are specifically for educators. So for example, if I go in here and go to browse all, if I wanted to find out more about Immersive Reader, for example, I can do a search, and these courses are specifically for educators in K-12 schools. And then I can go in and participate. Some of them are just information, some are videos, and there's always a quiz at the end. And you'll get a nice little transcript with all the information about how many hours you spent on Microsoft Learn. The next place that we like to direct you to is our Teams YouTube channel. So we have our own YouTube channel where we create lots of videos. We do try and update them as much as we can. but they're specific to our tenancy. So if you see something in here, it means it should be possible in our tenancy, and hopefully it should work. There's lots on Microsoft. That's the topic that we create videos on the most. Most of them are very short. You can see there's some short ones up here, but we do also upload our webinars here as well. So that's always a great place to have a look at. And then the last place, and I think some of you are already members of this team, if I can get into it, is the Microsoft support team. Just bear with me while I go in. So if you're not already a member of the M365 support and collaboration team, I really do highly recommend that you join this team. In here, you can ask any question and either a member of our team will answer it or someone else in the department will as well. So lots of people are quite generous in sharing how they do things in their own school. So if you've got a question, you'd know no questions are ever too dumb, putting it in here and someone will be able to help you. And with that, I think we've just about used up all the time. Before we do go today, we would love you to give us some feedback. So the last link that we're going to put in the chat, and Lynn's beat me to it, is to our feedback form. So if you could possibly click in that and give us some feedback, that would be brilliant.